Trigger warning, this episode discusses themes of alcohol abuse, which may be distressing for some listeners. Please proceed with care and prioritize your well-being. If you need support, consider reaching out to Alcoholics Anonymous or your healthcare provider.
All right, quiet on the set.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. Before we dive into this week's episode, Steve, what'd you watch last week?
I had a Donna Reed Film Festival last week, and I watched a couple of her lesser-known movies, which was really, really fun for me. Two that I had never seen. The first one I watched was called See Here, Private Hargrove. From 1944, which was kind of a military propaganda comedy, so to speak. And it starred,
That's an interesting genre.
It definitely had little propaganda elements in there, pro-America and supporting our boys at war.
II, yeah.
You know, it was really sweet. It starred Robert Walker, who we featured on the show with his own episode quite a while back. And it was Donna Reed played the love interest, and she was just lovely. And this was the one I really, really liked and really recommend. I watched a movie called Gentle Annie, which was also from 1944. It was kind of a Western, and Donna Reed again plays the love interest of James Craig. It also starred Marjorie Main in a killer performance from Marjorie Main. She's Gentle Annie. It had Harry Morgan in it, and it's just really fun movie about train robbers, but you really like them.
Okay.
And you kind of cheer for them.
And you kind of want them to steal stuff.
Exactly. Well, what did you watch?
I watched The Two Mrs. Carrolls.
Oh, great movie.
1947.
Yep.
Such a great movie.
So good.
You know, I looked back. Humphrey Bogart did not apparently get very good reviews, but I think he is fantastic in that film.
Oh, agreed. 100%. So good.
And of course, our girl, Barbara Stanwyck is in there. And then I watched, in preparation for today's episode, I watched The Unseen with our beautiful subject and Joel McCrea.
Oh, another good one.
Yeah, and that is from 1945, and she is wonderful in it. It's a really interesting film. Herbert Marshall is fantastic, and Joel McCrea is always
so solid, so reliable.
I thought it was sufficiently creepy, and sufficiently bratty children, which is always interesting when you have a haunted.
We love
kind of
bratty children.
Yeah, right.
That's hilarious. Today, we're going to talk about somebody that was in that movie. Hollywood legend has it that ethereal beauty Gail Russell was discovered after Paramount Studios talent manager William Micklejohn picked up two hitchhiking Santa Monica High School boys who told him about the Hedy Lamarr of Santa Monica High School. They had this girl in their class. They said she looked just like Hedy Lamarr. She was a beauty. Well, Micklejohn was intrigued by this, so he tracked down Gail Russell at the high school, and he arranged for a screen test. Well, the rest, as they say, is Hollywood history. If only it had been that easy for Gail Russell. And we're going to get into her life, her career, her struggles, and sort of the tragedy of what befell her.
Well, Gail Russell was born Elizabeth L. Russell on September 24th, 1924 in Chicago. Her parents were George and Gladys Russell. And this is maybe partly what the issue is. I'm just doing a little armchair psychology.
Yeah.
They were both interested in having entertainment careers when they were younger. Her father had been a musician, but then later worked for Lockheed in the aerospace industry. And her mother had always wanted to be an actress. She also had an older brother, George Jr., 5 years older. And it may have been her mother's failed dreams of Hollywood that pushed young Gail toward a career as an actress. George Jr., Gail's brother, was pushed into music to fulfill his father's failed ambitions.
Oh, there's nothing like parents' failures to live vicariously through their kids.
Yeah.
You know, recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
Gail was this delicate girl. She was painfully shy as a child, and she only wanted to be an artist. She loved to paint. She loved to draw, and that's where she was happiest. That's where she found peace. You know, she was so shy that she used to hide under the family's piano when people would come over to visit. Later in life, Gail would comment, and this is the quote, I can't remember when I wasn't painfully shy. I don't mean the garden variety shyness most people have. Mine was 1,000 times worse. I was possessed with an agonizing kind of self-consciousness where I felt my insides tightening into a knot, where my face and hands grew clammy, where I couldn't open my mouth, where I felt impelled to turn and run if I had to meet people. Wow.
Wow. Well, clearly, as a child, quiet, introspective, as you mentioned, finding solace in creative expression, but not as an actor.
Yeah.
Art was a significant part of her early life, and she did have a natural talent for drawing. So that was the outlet through which she processed the world around her. As she grew up, she blossomed into a breathtaking beauty with delicate features and piercing sapphire blue eyes.
Yes.
Her mother, ambitious mother, decided that Gail should be in the movies. The only problem? Gail had absolutely no interest.
Oh.
So when the family relocated to Los Angeles for work, Gladys saw this as her chance to get Gail, her daughter, into the movies. Of course, this was Gladys's dream and not Gail's. Shortly after the family arrived in California, the war broke out. Mr. Russell lost his job, thrusting the family into financial hardship, which is going to play into what happens next for Gail.
Yes. The Russells, they settled in Santa Monica, and Gail enrolled as a freshman at Santa Monica High School, where she was a very unassuming student who loved her art classes. Well, despite her shyness, her striking beauty really got noticed in school. And whether she really was discovered thanks to those hitchhiking classmates, or, as it's also been reported, she got there due to the drive and push of her very ambitious mother, Gladys, Gail landed a screen test at Paramount Studios. As Russell later recalled in a fan magazine, "When I was discovered for the movies, I was sleeping on the living room floor on newspapers. Paramount offered me a minimum salary, which was $50 a week. Mom said, 'Take it, we need the money.' And so she did, and the fate of Gail Russell was then cast."
She made her screen debut in 1943 in Henry Aldrich Gets Glamour. But it was a pretty traumatic experience. While the camera loved her stunning face, Gail gave a very amateurish performance. Well, she didn't have any training.
She was so fresh and new at
Exactly.
this. Yeah.
She was basically a high school kid. Paramount knew that she needed help, so they hired a personal acting coach for her, Bill Russell, no relation. Bill Russell worked tirelessly on Russell's stage fright, but he couldn't do anything to make her feel comfortable in front of the camera. Somehow, Gail got through her first picture and probably hoped that would be the end of her career.
Yeah.
But Paramount wasn't through with her yet.
Oh no, they saw potential. They saw dollar signs in her beauty. Well, next they assigned her a small role in the Ginger Rogers Ray Milland musical drama Lady in the Dark from 1944, which she performed adequately enough in. But Gail was thrilled to be working with Ginger Rogers, who had been her favorite movie star. So it was quite exciting for her to be in a movie with Ginger Rogers. Well, Rogers was very flattered by Gail's admiration, and she was very kind to Gail on set. I think she tried to help her along.
It wasn't until Gail was cast in the romantic thriller The Uninvited, 1944, opposite Ray Milland and Ruth Hussey, that this dazzling beauty with the soulful eyes caught on with moviegoers. It was a calculated risk to cast someone so inexperienced in such an important role. So they did lean on her acting coach to get her up to snuff. Gail played Stella, a troubled young woman who is drawn into the eerie and mysterious happenings of a haunted house.
Yes. And there's that great theme music, Stella by Starlight, which is her theme, kind of so haunting. The filming was anything but smooth sailing. Associate producer Charles Brackett wrote in his autobiography that Gail would cry on set with her mother, saying she could only do 5 or 6 takes before she'd burst into tears. Well, she did have a friend on set in Ray Milland. He'd worked with her previously in Lady in the Dark, and he knew about her delicate state of mind, so he tried to help her. You know, he even took his time out to run lines with her, really tried to support her as best he could. So she did have a friend on set in him.
It's during this shoot that Gail discovers the only thing that calms her nerves and gets her through filming is alcohol.
Yikes.
In an article in September 1997 issue of Fangoria magazine, writer Tom Weaver wrote that the director of The Uninvited, Lewis Allen, was quoted as saying that it was a makeup artist on set who introduced Gail to the calming effects of booze. And in her autobiography, actress Yvonne DiCarlo wrote that it was fellow Paramount contract player Helen Walker who introduced her to alcohol. Whatever this story is, we'll never know. But whoever gave her this friendly advice, it was the beginning of a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Yeah. When The Uninvited came out, it was a huge hit, like critically and commercially. And critics were so impressed with her emotional depth and her ability to convey vulnerability. These traits would, become central to her acting style throughout her career. Well, Paramount saw the potential in Gail, and they pushed hard to groom her for major stardom. Whether Gail wanted it or not, they decided she was going to be a star, and they put the machinery in motion. Yeah.
Right.
Well, they gave her a leading role next alongside Diana Lynn in the charming romantic comedy Our Hearts Were Young and Gay, 1944. And this, of course, was based on the adventures of Cornelia Otis Skinner and Emily Kimbrough as they traveled to Europe unescorted at the turn of the century. Scandalous.
Shocking.
Well, during the filming, Gail and Diana Lynn became extremely close friends. And it was Gail's second association with Cornelia Otis Skinner, which I find this so interesting because she played her in this movie, but Skinner had a supporting role in one of Gail's first movies, The Uninvited. Kind of a cool tidbit
that's
fact.
interesting.
The film was a huge hit, and Gail and Diana were awarded Best Performance of the Month by Photoplay magazine.
Next up, she was cast opposite star Alan Ladd in the horse racing drama Salty O'Rourke from 1945. Ladd, who is struggling with alcohol himself, tries to help Gail through the production, and they become friends. She follows this in the mystery thriller The Unseen, 1945, with Joel McCrea, which we talked about at the top of the show. And then after that, Our Hearts Were Growing Up, 1946, which is the sequel to Our Hearts Were Young and Gay. So Gail Russell's star is definitely on the rise. Paramount is putting her in movie after movie, and they're also making her do a lot of publicity and personal appearances. And when you're painfully shy,
it's torture.
It's just torture.
I was going to say it must have been torturous for that poor
Yeah.
girl. Everything that happened so quickly for Gail, and she just wasn't emotionally prepared for the public interest in her and the constant eyes on her. This was hell for her. She was just not equipped to be a movie star, the bottom line. Besides being painfully shy, she also suffered almost crippling stage fright. And as she continued to work nonstop, she sank further and further into alcoholism.
And she, at this point in her career, is only 23 years old.
Yeah, think about that.
Yeah. Well, before we continue with her story, it's time for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the pop quiz question today, it involves Gail Russell, of course. And on Gail's tombstone in North Hollywood, it says Gail Russell Mosley. Where does Mosley come from?
Good question. We'll be back with the answer and more about the beautiful Gail Russell after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back. But first, another stop on the Hollywood tour. They're about to talk about Gail's husband, Guy Madison. Interestingly, that young man kind of stumbled into that film career before becoming a TV star and hero to the baby boom generation. Here's the backstory. He was raised in the 1920s outside Bakersfield, California, the rough and tumble oil town that spawned its own strand of country music. His father was a railway mechanic and farmer, and Madison's childhood was spent roping calves and breaking horses. But rather than becoming a cowboy, he found work as a telephone lineman, repairing broken phone lines. Then he signed up for war service with the Navy in 1942. Well, while on Liberty one weekend in Hollywood, he attended a Lux Radio Theater broadcast, and he was spotted in the audience by an assistant to David O. Selznick, who wanted an unknown sailor to play a small but prominent part in 1944's Since You Went Away. He promptly signed the actor to a contract. Selznick in the studio concocted the screen name Guy Madison this way. The Guy was the guy girls would like to meet, and the last name Madison from a Dolly Madison cake wagon driving by. Madison filmed his one scene on a weekend pass and returned to duty. The film's release brought 43,000 fan letters for Madison's lonely, strikingly handsome young sailor. And at war's end, he returned to find himself a star in the making. That appearance on film in 1944 is said to have caused girls to fall out of cinema balconies. The masculine square jaw, straight nose, and crucially soft eyes made him just the right combination of familiar and unattainable. Many of his publicity photos were taken at the beach and always without a shirt. He was one of the first male stars, quickly dubbed Beefcake. Not bad for a shy kid from Bakersfield. And now back to Steve and Nan from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we get further into the life and tragedy of Gail Russell, we wanted to give a shout out to our listener of the week. And this week, we are honoring Michael Wood from Gainesville, Florida. Michael wrote us an incredible email. Thank you so much for the compliments. We're so glad you're listening. We're so glad you're supporting us. And Michael would like to see episodes about Sonja Henie, Anita Ekberg, Cesar Romero, and George Nader. All four excellent choices.
Those are great choices. Thanks, Michael. Well, it's 1947, and Gail Russell is reteamed with Alan Ladd in Calcutta. Director John Farrow had a hard time working with Gail, too. He thought she was lovely and she was cooperative, but her nerves just got the best of her in her performance. She would unconsciously clasp her hands together and then begin wringing them on camera, which works for something like The Unseen.
Yes, because you're nervous and
Right,
scared.
because you're nervous and scared, but it doesn't work in this film.
No.
Farrow was constantly having to cut the scene because of her nervous hand-wringing. Eventually, he tied her hands to her sides with handkerchiefs,
Poor
which is
Gail.
really, like, you wouldn't be allowed to do that
I
nowadays.
think that's probably illegal.
Yeah.
Well, sometime in the mid-1940s, Gail met rising star Guy Madison. Now, Madison had just made a splash playing opposite Dorothy McGuire in the romantic post-war drama Till the End of Time in 1946. Great movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. So good. They soon became romantically involved, and seriously, was there ever a more beautiful couple
Gorgeous.
in all of Hollywood? I mean, their beauty was almost blinding.
Yeah.
It was too much.
Also in 1947, John Wayne personally selects Gail Russell to appear as the quiet young Quaker girl in his anti-violence film Angel and the Bad Man, which was with Republic Pictures and really produced by John Wayne.
Yeah, his production company. Yeah.
They become fast friends, Gail Russell and John Wayne. Seeing that Russell was struggling, Wayne actually took her under his wing and tried to help her.
Yeah, I think a lot of people saw her vulnerability and they saw that she was struggling, like Ray Milland and Ginger Rogers. And I think she has had that quality about her that you wanted to protect her. You wanted to, to help her. And I think people did that. And I think that's so beautiful.
Right.
It's just a shame that nobody was able to help her ultimately. In 1948, director John Farrow cast Gail once again in the film noir Night Has a Thousand Eyes with Edward G. Robinson and John Lund. And despite the film being successful, Paramount had grown tired of her unreliability and they didn't renew her contract. So she became a freelance actress. And as a freelance actress, she moved over to Republic Pictures, which was a step down from Paramount, definitely. And she starred in this moody film noir, which is actually a good movie, Moonrise, 1948, with Dane Clark and Ethel Barrymore. And wanting to help Gail out, her old pal John Wayne once again cast her as his leading lady in Wake of the Red Witch, 1948, also at Republic. Wayne's friendship with Russell did not go over so well with his Spitfire wife, Esperanza. She accused him of having an affair with the fragile beauty, and one night, convinced that they were actually together, she even took a shot at John Wayne when he came home late.
Yikes.
So don't mess with Esperanza.
Well, the next year, Gail Russell and Guy Madison marry on August 31st, 1949. However, the marriage almost seems doomed from the start as Russell's drinking is increasing. She does continue to work, but in lesser productions like the action-adventure film Song of India, 1949, with Turhan Bey, where she played an East Indian princess. The Western, El Paso, 1949, with John Payne and Sterling Hayden. The horse racing biopic, The Great Dan Patch, 1949, with Dennis O'Keefe. And then the adventure film Captain China, 1950, reuniting her with the wonderful John Payne.
In November of 1953, she was arrested for the first time for drunk driving in Santa Monica. She eventually pled guilty and she was placed on 2 years of probation and she paid a $150 fine. A month later, Guy Madison asked for a divorce. Their divorce became final in 1954. She began to become even more unreliable at work and her once promising film career slowed down and the quality of the film she was offered diminished.
Well, and to make matters worse, when Esperanza Wayne sues John Wayne for divorce in 1953, she actually names Gail Russell as a correspondent, claiming that Wayne had spent the night with Russell after a drunken cast party, which is not true.
Yeah.
Wayne denies the charge and rages at reporters, quote, "Why did she have to drag that poor kid's name into it?" Gail also denies the charges. She even contemplates suing Mrs. Wayne for defamation of character. The stress of this scandal sent Russell into a sanitarium to clean up.
Gail didn't work for several years during this time as she was trying to deal with her messy personal life. She finally returned to the big screen in 1956, once again aided by John Wayne. Wayne's production company, Batjack Productions, produced this low-budget Western, 7 Men From Now, 1956, and she was given the female lead opposite Randolph Scott. Well, during filming, director Bud Bedecker did his best to keep her from drinking. She followed this up with a supporting role in the courtroom drama The Tattered Dress from 1957, which starred Jeff Chandler and Gene Crane. But by now, the effects of alcohol were beginning to show on Gail's face. She looked haggard and tired, and the makeup team had to work overtime to remove the black circles under her eyes.
And she's in her 30s.
And she's in her early 30s.
Yeah. Things got worse for Gail on July 4th, 1957, when she drove her car into the front of Jan's coffee shop on Beverly Boulevard, pinning a night janitor beneath the car. Oh, now he survived, but that really put the nail in the coffin of her career. She was fined $420, put on probation for 3 years. She did try desperately to stop drinking. She joined AA. She even checked herself into another clinic where she stayed sober for a year. However, it wasn't long before her demons of low self-esteem and insecurity pulled her back to alcohol.
Yeah. By now, her looks were gone. They were marred by her heavy drinking, and her film work had all but dried up. After finishing her final film, which was this forgettable film called The Silent Call in 1961, she locked herself in her apartment in Brentwood with her pencils, her paintbrushes, her canvases, and she painted and drank. Well, on August 26, 1961, a concerned neighbor found Gail dead in her apartment of natural causes at age 36. She was surrounded by her true love, her art, as well as her biggest demon, empty booze bottles.
Gail Russell was buried at Valhalla Memorial Park in North Hollywood. In attendance were her mother, her brother, and old Hollywood friends like Jimmy Lydon, Diana Lynn, Mona Freeman, and Alan Ladd. It's been reported that Alan Ladd was intoxicated at her funeral and was muttering incoherently. Tragically, he would die 3 years later from a drug and alcohol overdose.
Oh, so tragic. So tragic. In a heartbreaking statement that Gail once made about her downward spiral, she said, "Everything happened so fast. I was a sad character. I was sad because of myself. I didn't have any self-confidence. I didn't believe I had any talent. I didn't know how to have fun. I was afraid. I don't exactly know what of life, I guess."
Can I just interject here that Katharine Graham famously said that there should be a statute of limitations on what you blame your parents for? But I feel like Gail Russell's life, she didn't have the tools.
Yeah, she didn't.
And as a young girl being put under contract to Paramount, she was in high school.
Yeah.
With no one there to really help her through and help her grow and learn as a human being.
And you've got this pushy mother who all she wants is to have a movie star daughter.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, okay.
Well, her tragic story, it certainly serves as a reminder of the pressures of fame and the importance of mental health awareness. What's the famous line? "I wish you fortune and not fame." Don Henley?
No.
Who is it?
That's Paul Penalino.
Oh, Paul Penalino. Okay.
Don Henley was, "Why does fortune smile on some and let the rest go free?"
Why does fortune smile on some and let the rest go free? And our good friend Paul Penalino always says, "I wish you fortune but not fame."
Yeah, good advice.
You know, especially in this time period when there were no protections.
No.
But we can remember her work today.
Yeah, you know, her work is remembered, and it's remembered fondly. I don't think she started out as a great actress, but I think over time she became a really good actress.
I agree.
And she had such a endearing, wonderful quality. She had so much charisma that you just fell in love with her.
Yeah.
She's often cited as an example of the fragility of fame, the human cost of the entertainment industry that often overlooks the well-being of its stars.
Right,
It's
right.
really a cautionary tale.
So for our listeners, Steve, what would be the 3 top films that you would say these are must-see Gail Russell films?
Definitely The Uninvited. And definitely Angel and the Bad Man,
Yeah.
for sure. I think that's such a great movie. And I think my third one would be, there's so many great ones, but I think I'm going to go with Our Hearts Were Young and Gay.
Yeah.
And you really get to see her young and beautiful. And I think before the alcohol really took its toll on her.
Right.
And you see such promise and hope in that performance.
Right. Well, let's remind our listeners of this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Well, the question was, on Gail Russell's tombstone in North Hollywood, which I have visited, shocker, it says Gail Russell Mosley. Where does Mosley come from?
I know this and I can't remember what it is.
Any takers? Mosley was Guy Madison's real name. And for some reason, she always kept it. Nobody really knows why. She always kept his real name, not his stage name, Madison, but Mosley.
Okay.
Interesting.
That is interesting. And I wonder if she was still in love with him.
I know.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Now that we've brought you down, let's bring you up by saying, hey, could you give us a 5-star review?
Please.
And could you also follow us on social media? Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywood You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and also on Instagram.
And we love hearing from you. Please keep those emails coming. Let us know your favorite Gail Russell movie. You can reach us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.